Waiters or waitresses? What's the worst day you've ever waited on? All right, so I had this small table in my section made for 2 people. I had the hostess sit a young lady at the table by herself. She was early 20s, blonde, a pretty black dress, cute heels, etc. I walk over to greet her in the process of saying, "Hey, my name, water. Okay, I'll go get, I have my guy meeting me here too." "Okay, ma'am, no problem." So I bring her water to her and she tells me she doesn't want to have to wait for him and orders a lobster by herself. Her food comes out about 15 minutes later. Still no guy there. When she's about halfway done with her lobster, the guy comes in. She says she's upset he didn't show up early for their date. I can only assume he was on time and she was 20 minutes early. I went to talk to him and he was the sweetest guy. Like, gives boots to homeless people kind of sweet. Very handsome as well, so he orders some food while she's arms deep in her plate, working down her lobster. I kept overhearing little bits of their conversation while waiting on nearby tables. All I can hear is him trying to be sweet and her just cutting him off, showering him with small bits of crustacean. I felt so bad for the guy. His food comes out and she's already done with her food. So she sits there playing on her phone while he tries to talk to her. She keeps responding with small little, "Fine, 'kay, not really," kind of answers. He asked me for a box and asked her if she wanted the dessert. She says she wants a slice of cake for herself tonight, so I go in the back and get it for her to go. He quietly pays and walks out with his head down while she's on her phone. He just seemed like the sweetest guy. I don't know why she could act like that to someone so sweet. But yeah, that's only one of many, many stories. You deserve better, King. Story 2. A guy made a reservation saying he was going to propose. He asked for a special table and for dessert to come with a sparkler candle and "Will you marry me?" written on it. I bring out the cake. The manager follows me with 2 glasses of champagne and my coworkers are cheering. We set everything down and walk away. They end up having a serious, quiet discussion. It is very obvious that she's rejecting the proposal. Then 3 of their friends show up and sit at the table, all excited, thinking their friends just got engaged. But it quickly became apparent to them that it was not the case. It's very quiet and awkward at the table. The woman who was being proposed to left, and the reject and his friends got wasted. They gave me a 20% tip too, which was nice, considering how crappy his night had been. Story 3. A few months ago, I had a woman who was attractive in her mid-30s, I guess, come in, sit down, and order a glass of wine. She was waiting for her husband for a date. I brought her wine. She waited 45 minutes and then put in an appetizer order. 15 minutes later, ordered food, saying he'd be there soon. Almost an hour and a half later, as soon as I brought out dinner, she asked me to box it up and bring the check without touching her food. Husband bailed on a date with his wife. I felt awful. She was nice and patient and had a few glasses of wine while waiting for him. She held it together pretty well, so much so that I can only assume it's happened before. I smell a divorce coming on. Story 4. I had a regular sitting at my bar in a chain restaurant about 2 weeks ago. He sits there for an hour, leaves for 20 minutes or so, and comes back complaining that he'd been stood up. The date was supposed to have arrived an hour before he mentioned anything. Poor guy. All of a sudden, this woman appears, apparently his date. Nothing out of the ordinary except for the fact that she was an hour late, so I continued making drinks for the restaurant. A couple of minutes later, and a waitress comes up asking if the woman was on a date with a guy at the bar. I responded yes, and asked how she knew. She told me that the woman had just left her. The waitresses section had been on a date with another man. Story 5. A friend of her friend got dumped by her boyfriend, and I was the only one she knew in town. So I spent the evening with her in a bar drinking with strangers. Just because it was fun, we pretended to be a couple and made a story up about how us celebrating our 3-year anniversary. It was a very small bar, and we basically had a big conversation involving everyone in the bar. After maybe 2 hours, we leave, and my friend gets a train to her hometown. Meanwhile, a Tinder match contacts me and wants to meet me. I agree, and she suggests that same bar. So maybe 1 hour after I left the bar with my girlfriend, it came back with another girl. We had a great time, make out, and leave together. Everybody got my back. Nobody said anything. Story 6. When I was in high school, I used to work at a local seafood restaurant, taking orders, earning my crappy pay. At this point, I had only worked there for a little over a month. This was my first job, so I never had experienced any terrible customers, but oh boy, was I in for a surprise that evening. A couple is seated at their table. I bring them water and ask what they want to drink, the usual. Immediately, I saw the guy was a major schmuck and the girl seemed like the average shy girl. They both ordered a steamed lobster, so when I brought it to them, I grabbed her lobster and pretended the lobster was clamping to him. The look of sheer embarrassment in the girl's face was overwhelming. She paid for a meal and left him there. Well deserved. Story 7. Worked at a breakfast diner. A couple came in. I remember almost exactly what they ordered. She had oatmeal and a fresh fruit cup, and he had banana French toast, 3 eggs, sausage, bacon, hash browns, and toast. She got a mimosa too, and he just had coffee. Every time I went to check on them, he ordered something else. More bacon, more hash browns, etc. The average bill for 2 people at this restaurant was between $15 and $20. This dude racked up a $40 bill. The time came to drop it off, and I went back and he said he forgot his wallet. So she put her card down. I went to the card machine and it declined. I returned to the table and told her it had been declined. She called her bank and I assumed they said tough crap, so then she said she would call her mom for money to be deposited. The call got heated, so she stepped outside. I could see her pacing and crying out front. She came back in tears and said something to the dude, then she left. I went over and said that he could run home and get his wallet. He looked at me and sighed irritably as if I'd inconvenienced him. Then he reached in his back pocket, threw down some cash, and left. It was a really small town, so this was the topic of discussion for a while with our regular customers. What a schmuck. Story 8. I once ended up waiting on my ex-girlfriend, who I was not over, and her boyfriend. After some extremely awkward small talk, I went to grab her drinks and noticed her boyfriend was not there when I came back. Then one of my coworkers told me he was outside the restaurant crying because apparently they fought a lot and he was a crier. It was both satisfying and sad to see. Eventually, they made up, but the whole experience was just a bucket of uncomfortable. Story 9. I wasn't a server, but I worked at the fanciest restaurant in an upper-middle-class suburb. The kind of place where house moms go to get intoxicated on Thursday nights. Anyway, one night one of the servers I was working for, I was a busser, pointed out this table to me and just said, "Listen in on this table. It's going to be a long night with him." The table had what looked like it was a pair of cousins out to dinner with both sets of parents, so I was originally confused where they were going to be in such trouble. I went over to bring them bread and I could immediately tell what he had been talking about. No one was talking, but they weren't even looking at their phones. Everyone was just tensely staring at each other. It was so palpably awkward, I left instantly. I went about my menial duties for about another 15 minutes when a conversation at the table finally came up. From the bits and pieces I put together, the 2 kids we thought were cousins were actually dating and their parents were meeting each other for the first time. So basically, nightmare situation for both kids. At some point in the night, the daughter decides she's comfortable with jokingly calling her boyfriend an idiot, and to this day, I refuse to believe that the girl has ever made a bigger mistake. Immediately after the words left her mouth, the boyfriend's mother loses her crap completely and starts driving into the girl, screaming at her, calling her names, and pretty much every single awful thing you can possibly say to a teenage girl. I was pouring water at the next table over at the time, and I managed to spill it all over the table because of how loud her outburst was. The girl and her parents left pretty quickly, seeing as the girl was crying her eyes out and looked absolutely terrified. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as they left, the boy and the father turned on the mother and released a near-identical stream of vitriol on her. It was so bad I wouldn't be surprised if they got a divorce. All things considered, I think that may be the worst date I can imagine for a 14-year-old. Oh my gosh, those kids need to be debriefed. Story 10. Couple comes in on Valentine's Day. No reservation. They get seated at the bar, order some drinks and apps, and are sitting there chatting and laughing. Seem pretty normal. After finishing their apps, the guy drops to one knee and pulls out a ring. Girl immediately shuts him down. He didn't so much as get a word out before she's saying, "Nope, nope, nope." Grabs her coat off the back of her chair and is putting it on, still saying nope over and over. Practically runs out the place. Does not look back. He looks crushed. Pays the bill, walks out, staring at the floor the whole time. Man. Story 11. It's been years since I've waited tables, but I remember this one couple. The guy was very possessive over the girl. Every time I tried to ask her anything, he would interrupt and speak for her. I don't know if it was for my benefit or hers, but she obviously wasn't impressed. She kept giving me this kind of embarrassed or apologetic look. Well, I felt really bad for her, so just after a few minutes after I delivered their entrees, I returned with a glass of wine and told her it had been sent by a gentleman from the bar. I'll never forget the dude's expression. Kind of furious, but ultimately defeated. I never really spoke again, and of course, I didn't get a tip. He kept craning his neck around, though, surveying the dudes positioned around the bar. I wasn't really worried about that because this dude was a shrimp compared to the guys around the bar. Thinking back now, I don't really think it was as clever as it did then. Sure, the guy was a total schmuck, but I didn't know him, and it could have easily sparked something that would have set him off later. Scary to think about, but the girl seemed delighted with a glass of wine. She thanked me, and she drank it. Maybe it sparked something in her, like the realization that there were better people out there. Who knows? Story 12. This reminds me of when my grandfather passed away. After the funeral, my family went out to a restaurant and got intoxicated and partied afterwards as is tradition. We throw parties after people pass away because the person wants us to be happy, even though they're no longer around, is the short version of it. We walked in, and the waitress sees a group of 30-ish people all wearing formal clothing and having a good time. So she walks over with a tray of drinks and the biggest smile I've ever seen, and she asks who the lucky couple is. Well, my mother told her why we were actually there. I've never forgotten the look of shock and awkwardness as she backed away to get us more drinks. Story 13. All right. So I had a two-top table with a very handsome young guy and a super attractive young woman, early 20s, I think. Anyways, I proceed to go over and greet them and discuss the specials for the night. They seemed nice, and it looked like it was their first or second date. I ask for the drink order, and the guy gets an iced tea while the woman orders a glass of wine. She then proceeds to tell the guy in the highest-pitched voice to order alcohol because she will feel so naughty if she's the only one drinking, and she doesn't want to be a naughty girl. This goes on for a few minutes until the guy gives up and awkwardly just orders a vodka soda. That was the first weird exchange. Next, I bring them bread, and they devour that thing fast. I ask if they would like some more, and the woman says, oh yes, she would love some, but she doesn't want to be a naughty girl again. She described herself as naughty again for another few minutes until I just left. They place their orders, and she goes to order a steak with fries as her side. She again repeats how she's so naughty for getting carbs as her side. Guy just looked so drained by the end of the night because this woman would not stop saying the word naughty. I could tell he was just pushing through because she was wicked hot and apparently a naughty girl. But gosh darn, there's a point where the whole high-pitched fake, I'm a naughty girl crap gets so annoying. Story 14. There's this couple that comes in about once every week or two in my restaurant, and the guy's a complete tool. He won't let his girlfriend order what she wants and cuts her off, saying, she'll eat what I decide she'll eat. It's really annoying because he'll just cut me off mid-sentence and tell his girlfriend to stop talking. Last time I served them, I was standing in front of their table with their food and they wouldn't stop making out, so I had to ask them to come up for air so I could give them their freaking food. PDA is gross. Story 15. Kind of a middle-aged married couple that came for lunch on the patio. Guy starts talking on his phone the second he sits down. It sounded like he was talking business for work on a Saturday afternoon, and he didn't hang up the entire time it took for the food to come out, at least 30 minutes. The wife was just sitting there quietly, waiting for him to come sit. When I brought their entrees out, I was so relieved to see him with her phone hung up. But not 30 seconds later, he's back at it, and he kept finishing and starting new calls all through lunch, dessert, and paying the check. I don't think I heard the wife say a single word the entire meal. Worst part was that the patio was overlooking a scenic lake, and he would not sit down, just kept wandering around close to the railing and talking. I know the manager got a few complaints from other patrons. Felt terrible for the wife, looked like she was used to it, and he made a comment about how much he liked spoiling her while paying the check. Still talking on the phone as they walked out of the restaurant. On top of all that, he would snap his fingers at me if he needed something. Oh, so a grade A schmuck. Story 16. My friend Susan was being chased by this guy since high school. In her late 20s, he showed up and they were playing around together, as she put it. Susan straight up told him they were just friends and never were anything more. Several months later, she was in a single auction and he bought her for a pretty good sum. This was also a dinner and they went with another couple. While Susan was backstage, he told her girlfriend he had bought an engagement ring and was going to propose that night. The girlfriend flat out told him that he was being dumb as heck and that Susan wouldn't marry him. Well, he did anyway later that evening and she just jumped down at him. Asked him hadn't it occurred to him they had never slept together, much less kissed or discussed marriage. Damn guy became a stalker and she had to get a restraining order on him. He finally backed off. A few years later, I'm reading the paper and the guy had been arrested. He was a lawyer. Had gotten married, had a kid, and was getting a divorce, and had told a criminal client that he would do his case for free if he would end his ex. Story 17. I'm going to hit this from the opposite perspective. Me and my wife run a day in a loud pizza parlor. We're both kind of annoyed with the place we'd chosen, not knowing it would host a bad musician after 8. The waitress essentially picked up on us being on a bad first date, and he treated us as such. Me and my very happily married wife, who basically just wanted to get our food as quickly as possible at that point, asked for a box the second the food was delivered. As he laid down the box, he said, sometimes people just aren't as interesting as you think, huh? That was the only time I've ever left nothing for a tip. Don't make assumptions. Sometimes your avenue is not what people thought it would be. Story 18. Many years ago, I was a 16-year-old hostess at Bennigan's. 2 couples came in for what looks like to be a double date. It's a quiet night and they're seated near me, so I people watch a bit while taking care of other things. The guys sat across from each other on the inside, the ladies on the outer edge in the bar booths. The bar booths at our location were elevated around 8 inches, so there was a step up into the booth, making it quite high. The men loudly drank and smoked and talked, while the ladies talked fairly quietly, one seeming to work hard to pry the other into talking a bit. After the appetizers and just before the entree, a quiet lady comes out of her shell a bit. She says something and nudges her date. And everyone is smiling for a brief moment before her date turns red in the face, stands up, backhands her out of the booth, and starts dragging her out of the restaurant by her hair while screaming at her. She's crying and begging for him to let go, apologizing the whole way. A lot of us were frozen in place, and everyone's moving. Servers were running out in the restaurant, and I'm on the phone with the police. He busts his date into his SUV, and the other couple gets in the same car quickly. Dude hauls, nearly running over a server as he backs out. He gave the vehicle description and plates to the police. It was obviously a dine and dash on top of him harming his wife or girlfriend. I never heard if anything came of it. This was nearly 15 years ago, and I still think about her. I wonder if she's okay and never got away from him. I hope she did. And I hope he's behind bars. Story 19. This wasn't a date, but easily the most awkward meal I've witnessed. So I'm at this breakfast joint. It's the dinner rush, so we're not totally gone, but not packed either. There's this family of about 6 people seated right in the middle of the dining hall, the most conspicuous possible place to cause an awkward scene. They're 4 older people, at least 50, and 2 teenagers who look about 15 or 16. This kid is just bawling while he explains to his grandparents and other family members that his girlfriend is pregnant. Like, he's barely even speaking. It's mostly just flubbering. His girlfriend is completely silent with her eyes on her pancakes. The grandfather, I assume, is just talking right over the kid while he cries. "Oh, Billy, what did I tell you? This is what happens when you let sin take a hold of you." The dude is making the kid feel so much worse. It felt so bad. The only time the grandfather stops screaming at him is when one of the other older people chimes in to get a punch in.
"I knew it. I told you they were doing something."
"What would your parents have said about this?" It was merciless. At one point, the waitress had to squeeze by the crying kid to get to the booth next to them. Tables are very cramped, and she's trying to take their order, so the lady with her 2 toddlers is just yelling over the bizarre and very loud disaster in the middle of the room. I need 2 kids' meals," with a funny face. "Well, you'll have to get married, of course. Have you talked to her folks yet?" Poor lady couldn't even order. Story 20. Former waiter here. There was this one date that comes to mind. At first, it seemed like it was going okay, but then I noticed the girl was starting to look uncomfortable. I decided to pay more attention to the conversation, and the guy was talking about how he likes to use moisturizing lotions and hair volumizing spray, and if she ever stays over at his place, he's got her covered for hair products. Then he started talking about how he thinks Justin Bieber gets a lot of undeserved hate and how talented Bieber is. This guy tried to hold her hands across the table, and she withdrew hers immediately. I could tell she just wanted to leave ASAP, and this dude could too. Then he brought up how rich his dad is and how his dad buys him anything he wants. Then he starts bragging about how he always gets what he wants, and she's just cringing the whole time. I wasn't able to catch what happened next, but later I saw her storming out of the restaurant with this dude just skulking about at his table. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 21. A blind date between a man and a woman while I worked at a pizza place. The lady ordered a small pizza and a drink, and the guy ordered a plate of fries and a root beer. It was weird to order just fries because this wasn't a place where you did that. What was weirder was when he finished, he ordered another plate, and then another, and then another. This was not a place with free fry refills. I also refilled his root beer about 20 times. Every time I came back with a new root beer or another plate of fries, the woman looked more and more uncomfortable. When all was said and done, he ate 5 plates of fries and enough root beer to float a boat. Story 22. My first year as a waitress, I'm maybe 19. I worked at a chain restaurant in a small farming town. Hostess asked me to pick up a table way out of the open section, which is annoying, but no huge deal. When I get to the table, it's apparent that they wanted to sit in private because she's got a big black eye. Not a fresh one, but the kind of weathered, faded purple that sits under the skin like it's always kind of being busted up again and never really heals. She got this big blonde perm with side bangs she tries to cover it with. The entire time, I try to ask her questions directly. "Do you want a drink?" And I'm out with, "She'll have a water." He was kind of sinewy, gnarled-looking guy, red-faced, wearing a volunteer firefighter t-shirt, drank a Bud Light, ordered the most expensive thing on the menu while she eats a salad. He definitely wasn't a new kind of guy. He was what you'd expect. I was actually at this time carrying a card for a women's shelter in my wallet, and I kept wondering if I should give it to her, but he never left her alone, and I was afraid if he saw it, it might start a fight between them. Finally, when they asked for some boxes, I went to the back and wrote his name. Got from the credit card in one so they'd know which box belonged to who and hid the card and some napkins in her box. By the time I finally worked up the courage to run out there, they had left, and that was that. Story 23. Obligatory, not a waitress, but story. So a place near my house seems to play host to a lot of first date from OKC and Tinder. It's really quite entertaining on Friday and Saturday nights to go there and just observe. I've seen several dates. Some where the couple was obviously getting along, and some where they obviously weren't. The one that sticks out the most in my mind was this couple, probably about my age, mid-late 20s. The girl is very cute, little blonde thing, big curls, sweet smile, and the dude is classic finance bro. Polo shirt, boat shoes, the whole thing. They're at the table right next to us, and this dude proceeds to talk about himself the whole time. He never stopped. She ordered a craft beer, and he starts going on about how he doesn't like women who are too high maintenance. He ordered something like Miller, which is silly at a craft beer place, not the one who's too comfortable with the guys. He's going on and on about his dad's money and his sweet job at whatever. Doesn't stop or ask her anything about herself. And story of this day went so poorly that he was still talking, and she was so tired of trying to say things and having him just steamroll her that she took out her phone and started checking Facebook. He was undaunted. She left when he went to the bar upstairs because he wanted a rum and cola. Story 24. Two women came in on a date on a Sunday night in the suburban bar I worked at. They were absolutely lovely to me, but a table with two lemon-faced older people were scowling at them, doing normal date stuff like sharing food and holding hands on the table while talking. The old couple had a miserable time because they tried complaining to me, and I said I couldn't do anything. Their mouths dipped deeper, and they huffily asked for the manager. The manager came over. I feel I should mention he did drag on the weekends, but passed for straight. Sat there and listened to them, pretty loudly, talk about that sort and family values, and eventually he nodded. Said he would understand if they never came back, but he couldn't comp their meal based on other guests. Leaned in and whispered that he worked on much better plays during the weekend, and he'd comp them if they came by. They agreed that would be acceptable and left. We then dropped 2 free tickets off at the lesbian couples table, dropped a straight demeanor, and invited them to come and enjoy the show. And we comped the ladies' dinner and threw in a free dessert. The lesbian couple showed up, and I heard they had a lovely time. The manager said he didn't see the old people show up, but the bouncer said a very confused and then angry older couple showed up looking for a comped meal. Story 25. I worked at a hotel or restaurant near my 6th form. I was a waitress mainly, but since it was a small place, I helped out with cleaning the rooms after guests had left as well. One Sunday morning, a guy and a girl in my year came downstairs on their own and looked horrified when they saw me at the bar. I really didn't care that much. I served them breakfast and cleaned the room up. It wasn't that bad, but it was pretty obvious they had rented it just so they could have intimacy. I don't keep up with gossip much, so it was only a bit later that I remembered. The guy had a serious girlfriend who was definitely not the girl he had walked downstairs with. Awkward. I never said anything to anyone. Not really my business, but seriously. They could have picked a hotel that wasn't within sight-line of her college if they wanted to keep it a secret. Story 26. The girl sits down at my table in the bar and is waiting for her first Tinder date. They have a couple drinks and she leaves. I think everything is normal. Until the dude then hands me his card and says, "You're prettier. Call me," and proceeds to head into a meeting in the dining room. To make matters worse, she calls the restaurant 10 minutes later to ask me if he really had a meeting to go to. Super awkward. Story 27. Old couple used to come in every Tuesday and order the same drink week after week. Fish and chips and a half pint of bitter for Sir. Scampi and white dinner for Madam. Both easily in their 80s. I'm sure you can see where this is going. One week, an old fella comes in alone and brings a crossword. And the next week, and the next. Heartbreaking to see, but he was still just as polite and tipped just as well as usual. You'd never know anything had changed. I hope they had a wonderful life together. Story 28. First time I was ever a waitress was at this fancy restaurant. You know, folded napkins, 2 glasses on the table, 2 forks, all that smush. Valentine's Day. This couple somehow decided that the 14th would be a great time for a first date. Appetizers roll around. They're chatting about what they do for a living, which was their clear giveaway that they were just getting to know each other. I deliver their main course, and these 2 people are pretty much on their phones until dessert. Man gets up to go to the bathroom, takes his jacket. Woman paid for the meal, which I overheard them discussing beforehand anyway, because she didn't want to take advantage of him and was a bit of a non-traditional gal, from what I caught eavesdropping from my other tables. They leave in separate cars. Guy comes back. I thought he had left. He was gone for a really long time and sits down at the table on his phone. Eventually realizes that the lady's coat isn't there and leaves too. Cringed when he asked for the bill and had to tell him it was already paid for and that the lady wasn't in the bathroom. I don't really know what happened that day. Maybe they both thought they got ditched. Story 29. Oh man. So I actually knew the girl this happened to, and she was my table. He arrived with a guy I knew who was a bad rep of being intoxicated and crappy. Right in front of his date, who is super hot, he tells the host that she doesn't know him, but he follows her on Instagram. When I'm taking the order, he tells me that he pre-gamed the date at a buddy's house. Orders a bottle of Pinot and tells my friend it's only for himself, laughing. My restaurant has exquisite food. He insults half of it. He tells my friend that he's a sous chef at a restaurant 200 miles north in a big city and is only in town to visit his parents. This is all untrue. I know that he's a busboy at a local restaurant. On a second glass of wine, he becomes belligerent, yelling, "Don't be a witch," when she says she may not go to a bar with him after dinner. I tried to order another bottle of wine, but I cut him off. She ended up paying the whole tab and walking out. Story 30. I was serving a couple who were clearly fighting. They weren't speaking to each other and weren't sitting near each other. It was clear the girl was upset with the guy, and you could tell by looking at the guy that he felt bad. I didn't ask them what it was about, obviously. But when I served them their entrees, I told the girl that I would give them a free dessert if she sat next to him and accepted his apology. I held up my hand, and they left happy. Story 31. They were in my table, but I eavesdropped as I served the table next to them. I'm pretty sure they met on the internet as it was their first time meeting. The lady was Asian and clearly not fluent in speaking English. The guy was white and reminded me of a 50-year-old version of Vanilla Ice. The worst part was, when he mocked their English, openly called her ugly and demanded that she pay for his beers. The most heartbreaking thing was that she said she would pay for his beers if he would stop calling her ugly. Well, that guy deserves bad things to happen to him. Story 32. I worked at a coffee place. Not like a Starbucks, but a small place. It was winter and there was an ice skating rink in the square outside. At about 3 p.m., a couple came in, all red from the cold. They ordered 2 hot chocolates and sat down at one of the tables to make their drinks and take it to them. It was pretty clear it was their first or second date. They were talking about their ambitions and stuff they like to do, etc. At one point, she walks to the bathroom and he catches my eye and gestures something about how hot she is. Since I'm making coffee for other customers, I just smile and give a nod so small that it could mean anything. She comes back and they continue to chat. After a while, they order more drinks and a sandwich each. When I'm bringing them over, he looks at me and then at her suggestively. He whispers something to her. She replies, "What? Is that a joke?" He shakes his head. He grabs one of the sandwiches I just brought and throws it at him, then storms off. He looks at me unashamedly. Everyone is looking at him now and asks me if I will whistle him for 50 euros. I think he'd been trying to talk his date into a triad. I said no. He screamed, tried to leave without paying, but tripped over some ice skates and knocked himself out on the metal fence around the ice rink. The girl came back a few hours later to apologize. I told her what had happened. She couldn't stop laughing. I ended up going on a date with her myself a week later, but we weren't a good match, and we kept it at one date. Story 33. I have 2. One was at this candlelit, white tablecloth restaurant. These 2 older teenagers come in on what looks to be a first date. His mom walks them in and takes pictures of them at the table. Really awkward. Then the mom leaves, and they proceed to have a really smiling or nervous meal together. Fast forward 45 minutes or so, and dude, man didn't have enough money to pay. So we wait on mom, who comes and picks up the tab. The poor girl never lost her nervous smile, but was pretty sure she was mortified. Occurrence number 2. A middle-aged couple comes in, smiling, but very quiet. Same restaurant, by the way. I don't really think anything, but a few minutes later, before the food comes out, I walk by and through tears, she abruptly puts her napkin on the table and says, "You know, I can't do this," and gets up and walks out. The guy tries to stop her, but lets her go. He stayed. I can only assume she must have driven and left without him, or she either got a cab. Story 34. While I've seen a few awkward dates where someone's not engaged or whatever, there are 2 that stick out in my mind. The first one was where a couple was having a one-sided argument where the girl's just being snippy and angry, and the guy was sitting there pretty much taking it, and only talking in a hushed voice so as to not draw too much attention. This seems to go on throughout most of their meal, and towards the end of them finishing their entrees, I ask them if there's anything else I can bring them. "Yeah, a new boyfriend." She replies while giving me a complete head-to-toe eye. I didn't even have a real response for that. Just kind of went with, "Oh, sorry," and awkwardly went to get the bill. She was cute, but 40 minutes of hearing her just lay into that dude just made me feel sorry for him. The best one, though, wasn't my table. It just happened next to my section. Basically, there was a man that took his girlfriend out to dinner, which wouldn't have been that big of a deal, but about 15 minutes into their date, the guy's wife sits at a nearby table to have dinner with her mom. 5 minutes later, the woman sees her husband at the table with another woman, and you can imagine how that went down. Story 35. So I created an account just to tell the story. It's not really a date, but one time I had an older woman come in and sit in a booth facing the door. She told me that she was waiting for a date. Okay, so go get her a drink. She's reading a book, and every time the door opens, she would look up expectantly. Some time passes, and eventually she orders dinner. She finishes eating, and no one ever shows up, and I feel a little bad, but I've been in the industry for a while, and it's not the first time one of my tables got stood up. I give her the check, and she goes on her way. Fast forward about 3 weeks. I'm working, and I turn the corner to head to the kitchen, and guess who is sitting in the exact same booth, reading the exact same book? Yep, it's her. I stop by and ask if she remembers me, and she says, "Oh yes, I remember you." I ask her how her evening is, and my heart drops. She says to me, "I'm waiting for my date." So I tell the server who's waiting on her, being my cynical self, that I think she's working us to get a discount. It's not unusual for us to buy a drink or give a discount to an entree if someone gets stood up, so I tell the other server to make sure not to discount anything. But she doesn't fuss over the check when it's delivered and just sits there, looking up at the door every time it opens hopefully. Anyway, I saw her about 3 more times, and I waited on her one other time, always sitting in a booth facing the door, always telling the server that she's waiting for her date. Still don't know what her deal was. I guess she was just lonely. Story 36. I'd say it would have to be the one where I'd put my date in hospital. I was working as a waitress in a restaurant that saw a lot of upscale business lunches back in the Three Martini era. The CEO of one multinational used to come through every few months and spend a couple of days taking people to lunch at the restaurant. He was friendly, and he'd often ask me out on a date, quite charmingly, which made up for the fact that he was some 40 years older than me. After about 2 years, I said yes to a date. Figured it would be a fun dinner, and then I'd disappear, dubious virtue intact. We had a lavish dinner in the rooftop ballroom of the Hotel Vancouver. We enjoyed cocktails, champagne, lobsters, a couple bottles of red wine, and then several rounds of double Armagnacs. There was a big band orchestra playing, and despite the fact that I didn't know a thing about ballroom dancing, he got me out on the dance floor several times. I was having a great time, and so was he. During the last dance, I decided to try and do the swoop with him in my arms. Did I mention that he was 6'4", over a foot taller than me? I dipped him down, and then I dropped him, and then I fell on top of him. We spent the rest of the evening sobering up from the emerge at VGH. I kept coming back to the restaurant, but he never did ask me out again. Story 37. I wasn't the server, but I was managing the shift when this happened. Worked in a romantic restaurant. We used to have a lot of anniversaries, birthdays, and yes, proposals. We even offered rose packages. I had a reservation requesting our most special private corner booth for 2, with a dozen roses for a marriage proposal. When the group arrived, the man sheepishly asked to be moved to a larger table because his girlfriend's mother had decided to tag along. The server said he was very uncomfortable the entire time. Well, he decided to go on with it anyway. He pulls out the ring, asks her, and the mother says, "No, she will not be marrying you." The girlfriend never said a word, just looked down at her plate the entire time. Then they uncomfortably continued their meal in silence. He paid for the bill, and the mom took the daughter home. I worked there for about 2 years. Must have had an average of at least one proposal a week. This is the only one I recall that was rejected, and the circumstances made it beyond memorable. Story 38. My time to shine. So during summer months, all these dudes come to town to do construction. Well, they come to where I work because it's the only decent place to eat in my town. This guy starts hitting on her busser. She's young, so we're a little weirded out, but whatever. He gets her number and pretty much stalks her. But there's a catch. He has a girlfriend from back home. The busser ignores him, so eventually he just leaves her alone. Out of nowhere, this guy brings in said girlfriend. Everyone at work is just kind of like, what the heck? But here's the kicker. A regular from the bar is hammered and tells the girl that the guy hits on girls while he's away. So she gets all upset and tries to leave. But she can't because she's in a town she has no idea around. So he makes her sit through a freaking meal with him. I could literally feel the anger radiate off this poor girl until they left. He never came back, but I did get $10. Story 39. I wasn't a waitress, but my little sister, her husband, and their baby went to Wingers in a college town. She said all the workers happened to be female, but this family comes in and all of a sudden the dad, stepdad, or boyfriend starts yelling at his wife or girlfriend. He's calling her a witch and just yelling at her, and then starts yelling at the 7-year-old about respect and how he needs it, and the mom needs it, and shouldn't be taking crap from her kid, and the mom and 7-year-old are just crying. The old guy stood up and told him to shut up and he shouldn't talk like that to a woman and child, and if he didn't stop, he'd call the cops. The guy shut up real fast and sat down, but as soon as the old guy left, he started again. Or someone would have called the police, but everyone was scared of him. Story 40. I was a bartender a decade or so ago. One of the barbacks came in on his day off with a girl he wanted to impress. She was smoking hot, but also very young-looking. She ordered a martini and asked for her ID, which she did not have. I had to tell her I couldn't serve her. The barback was furious with me because I was basically shutting down his date and making him look like a schmuck. I was angry for the whole date and kept coming to me asking to pour a drink for her, etc. And I kept refusing. She was going along like she was having a good time, but also kept goading him into asking for drinks for her. Eventually they left and he gave me the finger as they did. The next day he was working and I was off and she came in, again without ID, and he gave her a drink. Instantly cops came in and cited him for serving a minor. She was on a sting operation the whole time. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.